All right, guys, we're live. Imagine that. Happy Friday. What is today? It's actually, I got to check here, August 7th. Wow. So you're hanging out with my community manager, the community built by, for, and managed by community managers. As always, you can hang out with us on Twitter as well. So if you're watching the YouTube right now, head over to Twitter to hashtag CMGR Hangout. We have a simultaneous Twitter chat along with the video. So if you love what you're seeing today, and maybe you want to be a part of it, maybe you have a great idea, maybe you just want to tell us, you'd love to see some special content in the near future, head to our website at mycmgr.com, click on participate, fill out the form, and that's really how we keep this thing going every week. It's your ideas, your friends, and it's you that come here and help make things happen. So, all right, what do we have for you this week? Well, this week's title is Content-Centric Communities. It's a little bit of a tongue twister there. So we're going to talk about, there's an article titled Using Content to Build a Community over on the Community Manager, where Rebecca Lindegren does a great job working through ways to use content to build a community, including summarizing John Jantz's 5 types of content strategy, which is trust building, educational, community, contributed, filtered, and conversion. So I'm going to stop talking now and let everybody introduce themselves, starting with Sherry.
Hey everyone, I'm Sherry Rohde, and I am the community manager for Magento, which is an open source e-commerce platform, as well as co-produce CMGR Hangout.
Hey everybody. I'm Dom. Happy to be back after missing last week. I felt like there was just a gap in my Friday, and I didn't know what to do with myself. But I am a community manager for BTC Revolutions, as well as a co-host here with Sherry and Bruce.
Awesome. Hey, Carrie.
Oh, I'm next. Hey, I'm Carrie Jones. I am a community consultant as well as the director of content for CMX. We are an organization that puts on CMX Summit, which is a twice-a-year conference for community professionals all over the world, and just bring in lots of community as well as content strategy knowledge today.
Hi, I'm Anne-Marie Dooling. I'm the head of growth at vocative.com, where we do data journalism. Before that, I led communities at Yahoo, Salon, Huffington Post, AOL, a bunch of other sites, and I write about community in the New York Times, Wired, and a few other places.
Awesome. Well, hey everybody, thanks for joining us. I am Brew, the director of Awesome at BTC Revolutions, also co-producer here at my community manager. So, and let's jump into our first question here, which is, oh boy, it's like completely off my screen now. Let's see. Number 1. All right. Who manages the content strategy for your community and/or company? So let's just kind of maybe start with Anne-Marie and just everybody just pipe in.
Sure. So the publication that I work at right now is very, very small. We run sort of like a lean startup where we have a very small newsroom of a couple writers. We actually have more analysts and data viz and illustration people than we do journalists. So for us, content is about breaking news, and it's on the news cycle. So we have an editor-in-chief and a VP of content that sort of deal with the larger issues, and then my job is to deal with more of the trending stuff and the stuff that's immediate growth, as well as thinking of the product that's going to help us carry that long term. So for us, content is sort of a multi-pronged beast where there's different types of content, from the larger packages to the day-to-day content to the more engaging stuff to socially native content, which just lives on social network. And I think that that is sort of unique to breaking news operations.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I'm very interested in how like journalists are bringing together a community and things like that. At CMX, pretty much we look at everything on the website, and even our offline events are content. I mean, content is conversations, it's metadata on your forms, it's your 404 page when people get lost into the abyss of your website. So really, we're all responsible for content at the end of the day. Like every conversation we have is, I look at it as part of our larger brand. So I am the content director, but I look at my role as kind of like the de facto brand manager as well. So everyone produces content and has a hand in editing it even. But I make sure that all of that is in line with our voice and tone and things like that. We want to make sure that's consistent across the board. It's something that we have not done up until the last, like, I would say 3 to 6 months. And so like that was a huge realization that we made, is that someone actually does need to own this. It's not just like a let's see how it goes kind of thing. You need an actual person to be like the arbiter of what is your voice and what's not. So.
How about you, Sherry?
So my current role, I believe it's our thought leadership team that does that. From actually kind of close to what Carrie was saying, they are very involved in the content at our events as well as the content that goes live on our online properties as well. So.
Yeah, for us, it's probably a mix of partner agencies, on figuring out what the overall messaging is for a window, then with a mix of our content teams and our community managers, because they help sort of. Community managers really know the voice best, and what kind of stuff the communities are looking for, so yeah. Let's roll into question number 2 right away, which is your content strategy. See, here we go with these tongue twisters. Dang it, Sherry's. Is your content strategy classified by trust building, educational, community contributed, filtered, or conversion? Or if it's none of the above,
I'll jump in because content is everything that I do. It doesn't really fit under those umbrellas. But I think something that's interesting is when we talk about communities, a lot of communities are these sort of, it's the community first, whether it's an app or a forum or something in those arenas. I do the exact opposite, the reverse. So my primary business is content, and then we build community off that. And I think it's a little bit different because I am married to very specific goals that have to deal with publication and traffic before I can deal with the goals that are involved in the community. And I think it's something that's a little bit different because we're still sort of figuring out what content communities look like. So I'd be interested in hear how it works from the reverse for everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, I guess putting our content into these 5 buckets, right? I would say the bulk of what we do fits into the trust building category as well as the educational category. Basically, it's like all of our how-to content that I put on cmxhub.com and our case studies, things like that. And educational would also be like our newsletters. The summit itself is an educational product. We do workshops and trainings as well as like small series events, so those are all educational. But also a huge part of our content is the community contributed content in our Facebook community. So it's not a page, it's a group. So that's all about like having our community members bring up what is on their minds, what struggles they're having, and then we all help each other kind of problem solve together. So yeah, if I had to fit it into those 5 buckets, I would say that those 3 are really what we focus on, especially because community is such a new industry. There's a lot of education that needs to be done. If you look at companies like, there's a company called Our Crowd in Israel. They're a finance company, a finance tech company. So again, that's one of those industries that needs a ton of education around it. So it just depends on like your business goals and what your industry's needs are.
I think it also sort of depends on the platform that you're putting the content out on. I know for one brand that I work with, all of the content that we actually put out on Instagram is community contributed. It's all user generated content that we're putting out there. While most of what we have, say, on Facebook tends to be more of a conversion. A little bit more filtered in conversion when you come to talk about Twitter. When I saw conversion, I actually read it as conversation, which I think is, kind of all of the above in that. But that kind of content that you have there, it really depends on, I think, what does best on said platforms, because obviously, you're going to have conversion doesn't work as well on, say, an Instagram, just because there's not always a great way to have a call to action on there. However, it's a lot easier to do that on, say, a Facebook or a Twitter or something like that. So, just being able to tell which goes best, which place, definitely helps towards getting reaching those goals.
Sherry, what would you say is, specifically for my CMGR? I mean, kind of do a little bit of everything, or?
I think ours is mostly educational, to be honest, and maybe a touch of community contributed. Really everything we do is community. We're all volunteers here anyway, and all of our topics come sourced from our community, so it's a bit of a mix, I guess. When I was at my last job, we were very community contributed centric. I'm getting into too many of the same words. Anyway, our community was totally content centric, and it was mostly contributed by the community. We were focused on chronic health conditions, and we weren't trying to be the next WebMD. We weren't trying to give medical advice. What we were creating was a hub for those with chronic conditions to share their own tips with each other on what's worked for them and what's helped them, more from just like, hey, let's get in the room with people who understand what we're going through and share. So.
I am going to, with the sirens blazing behind me here, I'm going to bring a question we had from Twitter. It's from Crystal Bruce. Hey, Crystal, what's up? Thanks for hanging out with us on a Friday. Crystal asked, do you write community member profiles? And how important is it to showcase members?
I think the second part of that question, I've never written community member profiles for other members. But the second part of that, how important is it to showcase members? I think it's incredibly pivotal. It's super, super important to make sure that you're doing that, because if you're not showcasing them, then it just really seems like there's only one voice coming in, and the power that you have in showcasing members it's great in so many different ways, in that you have content that you're pulling in that you don't necessarily have to take the time to do, so you can focus your time in other places. And then also you're showing that you value a community member, and you're showcasing them, then other community members are going to want to step up because they also want to be valued, and it really creates this cyclical cycle of content-centered communities. I just wanted to have the best alliteration possible.
All the buzzwords. I would actually say to take a step back. I don't think I could recommend, yes, you should do community member profiles to every business. I think you need to have a full-fledged strategy before you go out and say, okay, we're going to start interviewing members. You need to know what your key messages are as a company, who your members even are as personas, the general who you're serving. You need a strong editorial calendar that aligns with your business goals. You need metrics, what are you actually measuring? What are you optimizing for there when you're writing member profiles? Is it because you're trying to build a sense of community? Is it because you're trying to showcase what an ideal member in your community looks like? Is it just to give back and create goodwill? And then you need a core strategy statement. So actually all of this is outlined. I just worked with our content strategist, Clem, on CMX Hub to put together what a community content strategy would actually look like. But I don't think it's ever a good idea to just start interviewing people, off the bat. I think you need a real reason to justify that work. It's not something you should just do and kind of half-heartedly do it. I think it can be very important and, like Dom said, very effective at building community and saying thank you for your contribution, but you need to know why you're doing it. ultimately.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. The community that I mentioned before from my last job that we did feature user stories in addition to articles that the community contributed, and it was along with our goal to help people know that they're not alone and to connect them with others who are experiencing the same things. And in those cases, maybe they weren't as strong of writers as some of our regular content, but it still gave us a way to actually feature them and help them feel recognized.
Crystal asked another question, which we're just going to bring in right away. And she says, do all of you also do social media on top of your role as community manager? In her case, they have separate departments. So what is it for you guys?
I don't, and I also have had several roles before, and I never have. That doesn't mean social media content is not part of a larger community strategy. I just think that if social is super important to your marketing channels, you need someone to specialize in that, because it is a super, super duper skill that a lot of community builders actually don't have. So it just depends on your business, but I have never done it.
It's actually really specific for me because I came up through the route of community management and then filtered over to social media, and they are very different skills. So actually, when I hired my team here at Vocative, I ended up hiring people who were not specific to community or social media. I hired people who had skills in different types of media themselves. So one person is really good with art stuff, the other person's really good with video and breaking news, and I wanted to teach them both community and social media skills from the ground up, because for me it was more important that they could create the kind of content that I knew could facilitate the conversations that we wanted around the community, but also that could live on social media themselves. So I sort of took a different route with that. But I think you're right that when you have people running social media accounts that are more geared towards community management, they end up being sort of awful Facebook pages where there's just a lot of low-hanging fruit or really shitty questions. There's a company that I like a lot, but they ended up getting rid of their community manager for an event manager, and this person puts these questions up on this page that's like, what's everyone doing on Friday? And I'm like, what? It's sort of the silliest thing I've ever seen, and I think that's the assumption that if you try to build a community on social media, the assumption is that it's going to be a lot of questions, photo captions, prompts, things like that, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the case.
All right, let's get back to our questions here. Question number 3 is, how do you identify the right type of content for your community? And probably someone could say, well, you could just ask them. What would you guys like to see?
That's not always a good idea. People will tell you all kinds of things if you ask them, which is fine. You should ask them, but maybe not execute based on exactly what they say. But what we have done, and what I see a lot of really great content people doing right now, is creating member personas. So for your community, there's buckets of people that you're serving, and so whenever I sit down to write any content at all, I ask, who is it for? And then I write with actually one specific person in mind. So maybe it's one of you that I'm picturing as I'm writing something, and that's really how I decide what's right for our community with the larger strategy in mind.
I have a very specific situation where we had one type of audience before I came on, and I came in with a group of executives that wanted to change the tone of the content. So I inherited a community that was just sort of awful, unmoderated, unkept, ignored, angry, and then made the judicial decision to cut them off for a little bit while we reconfigured, and then sort of slowly reintroduced them with things like questions and sentiment meters and forums, and then see where we stood. And actually, to your earlier point about social media, Facebook was actually very helpful in this endeavor, because I can see who was speaking and I can see how they were reacting to the new content that was coming out. And it's been very easy for me to then take that and quantify what we're doing with them on the site and within the actual community, because I then have the gauge of what kind of content are they liking, what are they not liking, who are we maybe going to lose because we've changed a little bit. And I think that's okay, because there's a lot of thought around growing communities, and that you maybe want to have the biggest membership, and I don't actually subscribe to that theory. So it's been sort of a nice, relaxing exercise for me to be able to say we don't agree anymore and you can go to another community.
Oh, sorry about that. My controls were locked up for a minute. Sherry, Dom, either of you have anything to add to this?
I think they hit it pretty well. Like in my case, similarly to Carrie, I don't have written out personas yet at this point, but I do very much think about someone from each of the types of content that we would be focusing on when it's me that's looking at the content. Since I don't actually do our content strategy, that's not a huge part of what I do, though.
Yeah, I know you sort of joked around about it at the get, but you know, that asking the question of what the right type of content for your community, you know, obviously not executing on everything that everybody says, but taking that and sort of you know, taking that data, that information that you get from people, even if it's not opening it up to your entire community. You know, if you're a community that's been around for a bit, you know who your super users are, you know who your influencers are, you know, the people that, you know, even asking them as you're thinking, you know, Carrie, if you're thinking specifically, it's like, oh, I think I'm this type of content that Sherry would like, therefore 9 other people would probably like it, or more than that, because Sherry's super popular, so everybody would like it. But you know, going in and asking her, just be like, hey, what do you think of, like, you know, this, or this? Maybe not making it so open-ended, but like, hey, we have 3 ideas. What do you think of this? And sort of taking a little bit of a pulse that way. You know, not, you know, having anybody be too open-ended with it, but sort of guiding them in a specific direction. Because then not only do you get a little bit more information, but then you have that sort of intrinsic buy-in with people, that they think that they helped sort of create a little bit of that content strategy, so they will be more likely to be your champions of it in the community at large. But then again, you know, taking that information, and another thing, I don't want to ramble here, but another thing is the idea of, you know, really paying attention to the type of content that they are sharing that's not your community's content. So looking at their profiles and seeing things that they do outside of your community. And what are they sharing? What are they paying attention to? And then sort of trying to tailor your content to what they're already used to consuming is, you know, if you have a large community, that's obviously a huge endeavor, and you know, it's not something you just do on a Saturday afternoon to have stuff ready by Monday, but it's something that long-term wise, you know, you can sort of tailor that and then sort of, you know, tweak as you go. A little agile type thought process when it comes to content.
Yeah, I like where you're going. Oh.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I like where you're going with that, Dom. Is kind of one of my thoughts as well. Is, you know, there's several tools out there, and you know, some custom work you can do, but you know, this is where I think social media does come into play, because so many people share so much about themselves in social. So, you know, if your community is such where, you know, you can find your members via social channels, aggregate what they're kind of spewing out, and then, you know, look at word clouds and things like that, you might start seeing similar themes, you know, or things that are on their mind, and it may not dictate your actual piece of content, but maybe the flavor you give to it, if that makes sense, right? So you're sort of giving these little hat tips to, you know, both cultural references and news references and things like that, things that are top of mind for your community. So I think that's also something, you know, as far as getting into people's heads, you know, that's a great point. Go ahead, Sherry. You were going to point something out.
Oh, I was just pointing out, piggybacking off of, wow, I can't talk today either. I don't know what it is. Off of what Dom said about giving them options and seeing kind of what their thoughts are there. I know David Spinks does a good job of that with the CMX events, saying, hey, what would you guys want to workshop on out of these options? Or if we're thinking about getting a speaker for the next event on this, who would you recommend, type of thing, just to allow people to give input within parameters on upcoming content.
Yeah, that's true. He does do that actually really well without it being like weirdly promotional. I was going to say, to piggyback off of Bruce's comment, word clouds are really, really helpful. It depends what kind of a learner you are, but I'm definitely a visual learner, and so if you can like aggregate all of the keywords that your members are using when they're talking about your topic of interest, then you can have all kinds of content ideas for days and know what kinds of content will really, really serve them well. And to Dom's point, I've actually been thinking about creating like a community think tank of people to like help us, like maybe 10, 15 people to really give us buy-in on ideas. So like we're thinking about writing about this or an ebook about this. What do these 10 super influencers in our community think about this? That kind of goes into the next question a little bit, but yeah.
And then give them T-shirts, because everybody loves T-shirts.
Yes, all the T-shirts. We should be having T-shirts at the summit. That's just should be exciting.
Hashtag we'll work for T-shirts. Yeah, we'll volunteer for T-shirts. Also, I noticed something on Twitter. Just want to give a special shout out to the University of North Texas. I think it's the journalism class, but I know every so often, like twice a year, their homework assignment is to tune in to CMGR Hangout, and I saw a few of them announce themselves earlier today. So hey guys, shout out to UNT, right? University of North Texas. So cool. Let's bring in another question here, Michael. Michael, great to see you as always. Thanks for hanging out with us on a Friday. Michael asks how to manage community concerns about copyright or privacy. How do you frame a featured piece and focus on the contributor? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
We had an agreement that we had people sign if they were contributing content from the community. So any of our actual regular writers had to sign that before they became contributors.
I think that transparency is always the key with this, and I mean, it obviously is in use in communities, but I've been doing this in journalism even longer, and it's sort of like the old journalist going to the knitting club or the chess club and saying, can I write down what you guys are saying? And I think that it's just translated as we've gone online to journalists reaching out to people and saying, I like your photo from this event, can I use it? And now we use it in communities, right? So we have people having conversations, we have people that are creating things, and we constantly want to revolve around their work. But we also want to have it be applicable to what we're doing, and it's always coming with transparency first.
Yeah, I would definitely say to ask first before you publish anything at all. I mean, that's just good practice anyway. But then also, yeah, for legal reasons and copyright reasons, you just want to ask for permission. People are usually really excited about it and will then go on to share it. So that's great for you.
And if you're with a larger brand too, just make sure that you're using that brand's legal department and just trying to, a lot of the times those terms and conditions and stuff like that, especially if you're using it in any sort of promotional way, photos or anything like that, you kind of have to have a fake law degree to be able to write that kind of stuff. So, just make sure you're paying attention to what other brands have done and stuff like that. If you notice that they use a lot of user-generated content or, copyright, things like that, just be careful. Don't assume anything in that, because that's the easiest way to really screw over your community or your client or you ultimately out of a job.
Because when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. Katie Bappel asks, Katie Lewis asked, I'm curious to hear how much is determined by the numbers / reporting versus the conversation within your community. Back when we were talking about question number 3, so about measuring traffic, response rates, downloads, etc. Anybody have any thoughts on that? So
I think it's a mixture, isn't it? I mean, it's a hybrid. You know, like neither one is an island, so you can't really just go on either one. But a lot of times, what you'll notice is that the numbers and reporting will follow along with the conversation you're having with your community. You know, like those numbers typically don't lie, and an easy way to get what they are is you can look at that type of stuff, but having the conversation with the community, like they kind of do go hand in hand. I feel.
Yeah,
so.
I feel like the like the I guess more the qualitative stuff, right? Where your gut's saying like, oh man, people are really talking about this. What helps is if you can get numbers or reporting on it, it can help justify just how serious an issue is or how loud an issue is. I think the two work hand in hand because so often. They have that. Obviously, everyone's heard the saying, "Squeaky wheel gets the grease," but it's sometimes you think like, "Oh my God," we're hearing this all the time, and then like you go back and look at numbers, you're like, "Oh, we heard it 3 times." It just felt like a lot for some reason or another. So I mean, I think that's why the two go hand in hand well.
So that can actually be really in your favor as well, because if there's something that you constantly think and you're trying to use the numbers or the quantitative research to back yourself up and you're wrong, I think those are great moments because then it actually tells me something that I didn't know or something that I was maybe not doing correctly. So I think that they do go hand in hand, but I always try to find some number that correlates to what I anecdotally think is correct, even if it makes me realize that I'm not correct.
Here's another question I'll bring in from Michael real quick. Michael also asks, if you're building a new community, do you wait for members to contribute? How do you encourage and shape contributions?
I think that for this, I mean, I don't want to just jump on a bunch of these, but I'm kind of reminded of it because I just wrote the article for how to engage on a community platform and trying to get engagement in that. And one of the biggest things I think that I took from that was leading by example. Put out the type of stuff that you would want somebody to contribute, and be very overt and saying like you can be very out there and say this is the type of stuff. If you have anything that's like this, we would love to see it. And and if you have if you're brand new, if you can think of one person in your community that you think, hey, if I give a personal ask to this person, that maybe they will write a blog post, maybe they will submit a picture, maybe they will do something like that, and then ask them very outwardly to do that, and they do, then you take that, you highlight it, and you say, hey, look, this is direct contribution from the community. We would like to have more of this. So then you're sort of taking yourself out of it step by step and showcasing them more and more. And then in that, you'll get, it'll be more of that cyclicalness that I was talking about. I think I just like saying cyclical. So if anybody wants to play the cyclical drinking game, go ahead and start now. We'll see how much more we can get in 26 minutes. Yeah, there it is. Cheers, buddy.
It's also helpful to lean on influencers. If you know someone that is somehow within the world of what you are working on or what you're writing or what your community is about, and you know that they are a creator or a contributor of some sort, we actually just did a post based on the crazy New York Times article about women who have hairstylists in the delivery room, and I noticed just a lot of different groups, particularly Facebook groups and tangential groups, they weren't directly connected, talking about how insane this article was and no one was really doing anything about it. So one of my writers wanted to do something, but she is not a mother and she didn't want to come from a disingenuous point. So I reached out to one group in particular, one woman who is sort of known in different mommy circles, and said, we'd love to do something on this. Do you think that women would hand over photos, untouched photos of themselves in the delivery room without a stylist? And she was like, I have a good feeling that they will. So she put a call out, and then I started receiving photos from places that I had no idea that had heard about this. This morning I even got one. It's like 3 days later, and I received a photo from someone who's like, I heard about this in the Park Slope Moms blog, which I don't even know who put the prompt in there. But I think if you have an influencer who is related to your content, who is engaging, who wants people to be activated, then it's a really good place to start.
Great point. I'm going to jump us into question number 4, and then we also have Jen Chen's question, which dovetails into our Q4. What tips do you have to manage community content contributions? No tips, huh? All right, moving on.
I can start. I would say to just be really mindful about where they, like what platform they exist on. So for instance, just using CMX again as an example, the Facebook community, anyone can contribute there. And we are starting to roll out a moderation program. So that's how you keep people in line. People are starting to do like self-promotional things there, and we're losing some of the value that was initially part of the group, in that like it's a place to have conversation and bring pain points and solve them together. So we've created guidelines, and now we will be onboarding some moderators who can keep those posts in line with moderation. And then on the website, actually we're not doing any more contributor content on the website, and that's because we're trying to maintain our voice so strongly right now. And right now I was working with contributors, and the problem is that getting them to write in their own voice that also works with your brand voice is a very, very big struggle. And if there was a team of 10 with me, then I could probably do it. But I would say if you're like a lone warrior, it's a little difficult to try to get on this like higher quality bar of people contributing in your voice and their voice at the same time. It's just crazy. So pay attention to the channels on which it exists, and some are lower barrier to entry and some are higher. So
anybody else have any pro tips? Just looking for the tips? No? Let me jump into a quick add-on question here, which is Jen asks, what tools do you recommend to manage community content? So we got some tips. What about tools?
Depends on what you're doing, if you're paying them or not as well. So in our case, our contributors were actually freelance writers, and so we used TradeShift to help manage it. And we used HelloSign to help manage contracts because it made it easy for them to sign no matter what technology they were working with. So those tools made it easy for them to invoice and for us to keep invoices organized, as well as to keep contracts organized. So that helped a lot in that regard.
I think having a tool like Asana or Trello or something like that also, because you have to create an editorial calendar with this kind of stuff. So Asana has like a calendar function that then can flow into your email actually, as well as Slack and HipChat. So everything can go together, and you can even create like Gantt charts from it, so you can like visualize your entire production process, which is like the best thing ever. So I would say a tool like that helps you manage your content calendar, as well as like assign tasks to and delegate tasks, even possibly to like community members who are volunteers, things like that. I think you need a tool that you can collaborate with.
We got another question just came in from Crystal. Crystal asks, what sort of incentives do you offer your content contributors?
How about a shout out for Crystal getting the hat trick of questions on the panel today? I think that's number 3. So, way to be, Crystal. I'm not going to answer the question. I'm just going to give her a shout.
Thank you for producing content for us, Crystal. And your incentive is that we talk about you here in the chat.
Everybody should go and follow her. I believe it's CMGR Crystal on Twitter. So go ahead and follow her. and there's an incentive, some new followers, hopefully.
Anybody have any other kind of incentives they use in their org?
I'll answer the question, but I'll be a little bit of a bummer. Sorry. I've worked on all types of communities, and I've worked on some where we've sent people, flat photos of Photoshop squirrels and necklaces and T-shirts. And I've also worked in breaking news and citizen journalism, and you really can't send people flat squirrels and T-shirts. So I think it really depends on your community. Not to be the bummer, but sometimes the incentive is just being a part of something that is a little bit bigger than you or that you really love. And that's something you find with citizen journalists, that they just want to communicate with each other and they want to contribute and they want to be verified. And then sometimes you really do just have people that will only be a part of something because you give them a T-shirt.
But you kind of want the people who want to be part of it because it's awesome, right? I mean, that's their joy. The reason they contribute is because of how they feel when they do it, right? They feel like they're a part of something bigger, or they feel like they're part of the movement, part of the team. Yeah. All right, I'm going to jump us into question number 5 here as we are getting towards the end of the Hangout. And question number 5 is, if you solicit contributions, how do you identify those influencers? So if you're going out and saying, all right, I want to find specific people, how do you identify those people? Do you just go to Clout and just sort by, and then There you go?
Yep, and you kick everybody under a 50 just out of the community. No, I think that, when you're a community manager, I'm sure that anybody who is, if I asked you to name 3 influencers in your community, typically we all have some people that come to mind immediately, Now there's different ways that people sort that, whether it is the people that are, your heavy sharers, or the ones that are commenting more, or the ones that are producing their own content and sharing it in the group. But, I think sort of starting from there, and then, if you have specific content that you're looking for, whether it's a blog post or whether it's a video or somebody to, put out a picture, you can sort of take a look at the ones, your influencers that do that more often, and identify those and then sort of reach out to them that way. I know this is I'm talking very non-tool, just sort of eyeball test type stuff, but I think that a lot of times that's the gut feeling that we all do have. And
here's my question: do you even give a crap if they're an influencer, right? I mean, from a content contributor, I'd almost rather have somebody who has the heart and the energy and the consistency and the reliability, versus just somebody who has a a shitload of followers or whatever. I don't know, just thought. I saw you nodding your head, Carrie.
Yes, I can't agree with that more. I think, what is an influencer really? I mean, everyone's an influencer. We're in that age now. I think we've moved past yes, PR has a ton of value. It depends though. Are you trying to just drive a whole bunch of random signups to your app? Certainly a lot of businesses would like to look at those numbers. I've worked for companies that are oh, we're in Parade Magazine this week. We've just won the world. And then, 6 months later, after their coupon expires, they never sign up for the service again. So really, what you want is not necessarily influencers, but people influencers, but people who are just active fans of your product or service. Getting those people on board and actually building a relationship, a real relationship, not just a transactional, you write a post for me, I send you a t-shirt relationship, is cannot put a price on it, and then you can go to them for pretty much anything you need if you have a real relationship with somebody. So that's the value of not necessarily looking at people as influencers, but just as everyone's an influencer, everyone has value, and everyone can contribute.
So to piggyback on that, if you have a good moderation tool, you can look in the back end and see who is faved more. because you will have a lot of sort of ghosts in your community if you have one that's already active, where there are people who might not reply or say something, but they will fave things that they like. So it's really interesting if you go back into your moderation tool and try to sort by faves. I know in Discuss you can do this, in Livefire you can do this, and then you can see who are the people who tend to get more faves, even if they're not getting a lot of conversation, because these are people who are saying something that is resonating with the group, or resonating with your community.
Is it just me, or is she frozen?
She's frozen.
Okay.
No, you guys are all still nodding, so I thought it was just me.
Yeah. I was, well, I don't want to cut you off, but pretty sure you're frozen.
One thing I would throw out there, just kind of on the topic, is not looking at getting influencers just for the sake of influencers, but if you're trying to branch out and bring new people into the community, it is good to find other people who have a lot of, for the lack of a better word, influence in that area that may not even be aware of what you're doing yet. Like, if you have a community based around a topic, go find someone else that's talking about it, and see if they're a right fit for your voice in your community, and if so, then invite them to contribute. Sorry, Emery, we lost you halfway through your thought there.
This is actually my first time using the internet. I don't know if you know that. I've never been on the internet before today.
Well, be careful what you search for. That's the #1 tip.
The #2 tip is cats.
I got that one.
#3 is believe everything, and clout is king.
Thanks.
Did you want to rewind just a little bit? And
No, you know what? I'll just tweet it.
Right on. Jeez, first day on the internet, you're already tweeting? Good. All right, well, we got about 13 minutes left, so we'll say that if you're watching, please go ahead. We probably have time for 1 or 2 questions or a brilliant answer on something or thought. But wrapping up our last question, #6 is, how do you build and grow community around your content, right? So this is the whole topic, really, of today. So who'd like to take a bite out of this question first? Or shall I call on you?
Sorry, I'll jump in just because this is actually literally what I'm doing right now. So I said earlier that when I came in, I wanted to close comments because that had been the primary source of community prior to me arriving, and it was unmoderated and awful and disgusting. So the process that I've been through in the last few months was to identify outside tools that I thought looked like something that could be a platform for our community, and then to start testing them to see what made people more active, but what also, I mean, because I'm at a publication, I have traffic goals, so I needed to also quantify those with my bottom line. And we actually tested things from forums to sentiment meters to quizzes to Twitter bots, and just played around with what it was that seemed to make the community not only connect with us, but more importantly with each other. And we're not really done with that testing just yet, but I'll say a few things that I think if you're building from scratch are really awesome tools. Discourse is one, because you can pretty much shape it to whatever you want it to be. It can be a forum or comments or just a discussion board. And I'm also an enormous fan of Q&A platforms, and I don't think that there's really a great one outside of the box. We're building one from scratch here, but I'm really good friends with some of the people over at Reddit, and I know that one of their biggest issues was packaging those AMAs to be read as a Q&A after the fact, not just during the interactive phase, and that's something that I'm thinking about really heavily right now, to have the community be able to be a part of that awesome moment after the fact.
I mean, I think to add to that, platforms, like picking the right platform is really important. I mean, really everything happening on the web is content, so building a community around it. Like, basically you're building content, you're building trust, so you're building a fertile ground for relationships that are happening through your content. So it's then your choice if you want to take things to the next level and pick a platform and a space for community building. You know, communities are built out of like creating multiple like repeated shared experiences among people with shared goals. So really you just need a space to create those shared experiences again and again. So depending on what your goals are, like, you're going to have to pick the right platform. And there are over 100 community platforms right now, and I'm sure that there's like some developer right now in the Bay Area building another one. So we actually have we just published an ebook on all the community platforms at CMX. You can download that. But really, it's about picking the right space that's going to make sense for the community that you're trying to build. So you need to figure out your business goal and your community members' needs and find the intersection between that, where the platform can really serve both those needs. And then I would also say, like, I had another thing to say, and then I forgot it. Well, anyway, I'll let somebody else go. That was I gotta get off my soapbox.
That was brilliant. Dom, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are that I'm just blown away by what Carrie just said. That whole shared experiences and the continued shared experiences, I think is awesome. So I'm just trying to like write down what she was saying. So I don't have many more thoughts other than what she just said. So
cool thing is you can watch the replay too. So
oh, is that what you can do?
Yeah, that's how we get views.
Oh, okay. Now, will there also be somebody that will write a recap about this and maybe highlight what she just said too?
Well, hopefully, yeah. Hopefully.
Where would somebody find all of that?
At mycmgr.com.
Oh, hey, that sounds pretty cool.
All right, so here's the question. We have about 8 minutes left. So, Carrie and Anne-Marie, I mean, anything you guys want to specifically cover or thoughts that maybe we haven't really touched on, or something that you just like burning to say, yearning, burning? I don't know what the correct grammar is there, but
I think we should get Anne-Marie started on comments.
Yes, please.
Turn them off. If you're not going to moderate, turn off your comments. I hate it. I can't read another awful... Actually, if you want to read some really awful comments, go to Facebook and go to the Fox News Facebook page and go ahead and read their open thread from last night before the GOP debate, where they asked people to contribute their questions for the candidates. And it is just the most amazing, disgusting display I've ever seen in my life, holding babies in their photos and just cursing, and they hate everyone. But it's actually a really good example of why you should moderate and think about if comments are correct for you.
Yeah, I agree about comment sections. There's a reason why journalists are shutting them off in mass right now, because they're basically like a half-baked space with a bunch of floating avatars, or lack thereof, not a real space to build lasting interconnected relationships with people. So they're just like the worst of the worst, and there's no accountability there, because especially platforms that allow you to comment anonymously, just like people feel no responsibility to take care of each other when they are not identified as like real humans. So
right, and if anything, to build in like a punch functionality,
yes,
so that you or slap upside the head.
Well, so scientifically, it actually has more to do with the moderation and the overall administrative presence than the actual anonymity. But I think it is a really good point that people tend to give more information out when they have sort of that safety net or that cloak of anonymity. In fact, I don't know if you guys read the big controversy in the media world over the last week, where someone wrote an entire list of closed Facebook groups for journalists, and she published this list. And she published it in the name of being more inclusive to people of color and people that are on the margins of media society. But in doing that, she actually doxed quite a few groups of female journalists that were hiding from Gamergate and angry tech bloggers and other areas. So she actually did something very, very stupid in trying to do something nice. And I think that there was a larger discussion around closed communities and anonymity and sort of the cloak of safety that you have when you're in specific communities. So I guess that's just a long-winded way of saying that a lot of administration and moderation that goes into these groups is what keeps it safe and what makes people have an actual discussion versus just an angry, vitriolic screaming out into the abyss. But seriously, go to that Fox News thread because you will have the best afternoon of your life.
It's curious. I'm just curious, like, are these the same people that you want to kick out of your house in Thanksgiving or whatever? Like, do a lot of the people? I mean, I was just thinking about it last night. We're totally off topic, but just looking at my Facebook feed, I kind of thought, like, boy, some of the stuff that people are saying, like, would you just say that out in public, like, with all of your friends around? And if so, you're a terrible person. All right, so. The one thing I did want to quick bring up here, we're not going to cover this question today, but I did want to acknowledge that we received it. This is from my biz marketer. As a new CM, any words of advice, no historic background in the group, and what are lessons learned from Reddit? Sherry pointed out this could totally be like a few topics, and so definitely my biz marketer, we will we'll absolutely try to cover that in the future for some dedicated time. Go ahead,
Emery,
Sherry.
don't you have a post on community lessons learned from Reddit somewhere? Or am I making that up in my head?
Am I muted?
Not anymore.
Okay. No, I do have that. I wrote a op-ed thing for the New York Times. I'll put that on Twitter. There are so many lessons to be learned from the deep bowels of the internet that we call Reddit. But the most important one is just that Reddit is a platform, not a whole community, and that should always be remembered.
The bowels of the internet. I always call it the undernet. That's how I try to explain it to people who are like, what's Reddit? I'm like, well, it's kind of like the undernet.
There are so many worse parts of the internet than Reddit that I think it's sort of laughable when people are so terrified of it. Also, I'm on like a group for fat kittens, and like, I have a book club on Reddit, and like there's a nail art subreddit, so it's not all terrible.
You're right. But 4chan, maybe? I don't know.
Yes.
Who is this 4chan?
Yeah.
Do you remember that with the whole when all those pictures got leaked? Nobody knew who 4chan was. They thought it was a nickname for a administrator. Will this 4chan come to light? Who is this 4chan?
Yeah. People are smart. So, all right. What do we have coming up next week, Sherry? Do we have a topic?
No, we don't. Not yet.
Oh, right on. We're kind of like week to week right now, hand to mouth, paycheck to paycheck on my community manager.
We tentatively have one scheduled for August 28th, but until then, we need topics.
Yes, and I know I've mentioned this a few times, but we're still looking for a few more people. If you know any musicians who are okay to be on a Google Hangout and also like use social media or have built fan bases via like some form of community, we're trying to line up a good session to talk about that, and maybe even have a few of them perform on the Hangout, which I think would be fun. So, any ideas? Let us know. Otherwise, I think we're done. Thank you so much, Carrie, and thank you, Anne Marie, and of course Dom and Sherry. This has been a great lineup, great conversations, great topics, and yeah, hope to see you all next week. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next Friday. Bye.
Bye.